Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center?
One of the most anticipated movies in a long time is about to come out. The Dark Knight Rises. Get ready, because we are going to leak, spoil, and decode the new Batman film that's coming out. We're going to get into the meaning behind the meaning, the secrets behind the secrets. But first, understand, this is one of the most successful propaganda franchises out there selling tyranny. For all of you that say it's just a movie, for more than 50 years, the Department of Defense has paid and financed for most major action films. They all have a unified propaganda message selling you on the idea that you're powerless and that you can't protect yourself. Only shadowy groups, by violating your rights and liberties, can keep you safe. Throughout the Batman franchise, any vigilantes other than Batman are powerless, pathetic, fat, stupid, or psychopathic. To understand the conclusion of the Dark Knight series, we first have to go back to the beginning. In Batman Begins, a secret society known as the League of Shadows, led by Ra's al Ghul, played by Liam Neeson, seeks to put a poisonous psychotropic drug in the water supply to drive Gotham, the archetypal New York, into total insanity. Then he will bring order out of the chaos. And as all informed people know, governments have been fluoridating water supplies for more than 60 years, causing brain damage and cancer. So we see here in the first installment a revelation of the method, or the power structure, showing you how they operate. That there are secret societies that manipulate for good and bad. Bruce Wayne, the aristocrat, the banker, the globalist, has his secretive system, and then there's the evil outlanders trying to come in and take over. In Part 2, Batman, the Dark Knight, we're introduced to the Joker. Now let's analyze the underlying messages here. He is a nonconformist, a libertarian type who makes his own clothes and burns money.
Nothing. No matches on prints, DNA, dental, clothing is custom, no labels.
He doesn't go along with the mainline consumerist corporate culture. And so he's got to be a murdering psychopath who enjoys blowing up hospitals, bridges, ships, and killing police officers. But our hero, the rich banker industrialist Bruce Wayne, have developed a system to hack into cell phones and use them to create a sonar system that can give them a three-dimensional view of what's happening by using Defense Department technology they were developing to hack into all the cell phones and use them as audio microphone systems. They're able to save the city because they violate everyone's rights and spy on them without warrants. So again, it aids and abets and gives comfort to criminal elements in the NSA who on record are spying on the American people and using all of our appliances, from smart meters to computers to smartphones, to spy on us. All of it is pro-tyranny propaganda. We now move from Part 2 to Part 3, The Dark Knight Rises. So let's start decoding The Dark Knight Rises. Number one, look at the name, The Dark Knight Rises. And we're told that he's willing to give it all up.
You've given them everything.
Not everything. Not yet.
Oh, you've already given these people so much. I haven't given everything. So he's this Christ figure, this dark Christ who is fighting the evil secret society led by Bane, who is coming to destroy Babylon, the beautiful city. Here's a few juicy spoilers. Batman gets his back broken in a fight with Bane. At the end, as Bane is dying, we learn that he's a Darth Vader character who can't survive without the mask, which is the recurring cyborg archetype that humanity can't live without machines. Who is Bane? He's a symbolic demon, a destroyer, a symbol of the Hegelian dialectic, order out of chaos. To the conscious mind, these symbols don't register. To the subconscious, they are clear commands, just like you're a computer. The power of Hollywood, the power of images to program the mind is not debated. And the Pentagon and Madison Avenue know that. Remember back in 1975, when for more than 2 years, the beaches were almost empty in the United States and areas of Europe and Australia because people were so scared that a giant shark was going to eat them? Psychological warfare chiefs certainly paid attention to that. Even though on average, less than 5 people die a year from great white shark attacks worldwide, people would not go in the water and were demanding shark patrols and more lifeguards for a non-existent threat. And that's what these movies do, not just these Batman films. Every one of these films has terrorists blowing up major cities constantly to create the psychological illusion that there's big sharks out there that want to eat you, and there's terrorists under every table that want to attack you and your family. And you notice at the end of Jaws, the shark has been killed. He's been defeated, but still the beaches remained empty. You are being subconsciously programmed. When you go in one of these movies and just turn yourself over to it and suspended disbelief, you become a willing victim to have your mind literally programmed in that key fear state. Because when the mind is in that fear state, it is wide open to be reprogrammed. And now in the new film, we see the football game blown up. We see the police helpless if the state doesn't take every right we've got and turn our children against us and set up highway checkpoints and launch 30,000 armed drones and listen to our phone calls, then none of us are safe because the non-existent threat of Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and Bane are going to get us. The key to understanding why the social engineers want males in an arrested development junior high mentality state is simple. Through thousands of films and video games, we are bombarded with the idea that threats always come in the form of a giant evil monster or terrorist who openly announces themselves, not through slow cultural death. And men are presented with an idea of Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Herculean figure, or somebody like Batman, defeating the enemy all by themselves because the public is powerless. That's why now when I talk to so many men, they say, oh, you're such a hero. You go out and confront politicians. You go out and, fight for freedom. I'm glad you're there. What do you mean? I'm just an average person like you. We're not fighting big green Martians from Mars. We're not fighting, shadowy groups like Bane, unless you talk about the Private Federal Reserve that's hijacked this country. We're fighting the New World Order. We're fighting a corporate takeover system with regulations and red tape that doesn't announce itself as an enemy, but that just oozes in with bureaucracy to dominate and usurp our lives. We're fighting the UN and Agenda 21 and a federal government bought and paid for by foreign interest engaging in treason. When you're conscious or awake, aware, watching, when you don't suspend your disbelief, you see the programming, the manipulation, the hypnotic suggestions right there like it's written on the wall. But when you're unconscious, like the general population, you are wide open to be victimized by this programming. Hey, I like a good action adventure and movie as much as the next person. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a film if you're aware of the implanted images. But it's important that people become conscious of the manipulation that's going on. Ridley Scott, arguably one of the greatest living directors, is set to release a prequel to his 1979 mega hit, Alien: Prometheus. One of the most anticipated sci-fi films in recent memory. Infowars.com research analysis shows Prometheus is not just a film, but a revelation of the method, revealing the deepest secrets of the Illuminati mystery religion. I do have a lot of contacts in the media, as viewers and listeners know, and I have been able to secure a copy of an early script, and it follows very closely from the trailer I've seen and other leaks. And I'm not going to give the entire film away here, but in synopsis, this is a film about the origins of humankind with a super race of near immortal genetic engineers who are contemplating a genetic overwrite or rewrite of the planet Earth when meddling humans stumble in to the magician's laboratory. They are punished for their trespass.
It was so wrong.
The so-called space jockey is the advanced species that have engineered humans back on Earth and produced the bioweapon that we know of as the classical alien that burst out of your chest after feeding on the food in your intestines. The reason we're taking time out to examine Prometheus is because its storyline, its plot, mirrors that of many ancient societies. And the ideas presented in Prometheus are at the core of Western secret societies.
These are ancient civilizations that were separated by centuries, and yet this same pictogram was discovered in every one of them.
Please tell me you can read that.
I think they want us to come and find them.
Across the world, we see evidence of early civilizations' obsession with what they believed were off-world influences. From the Nazca lines in South America to the pyramids of Egypt, we see artifacts, testament to early man's obsession with off-world manipulators. Every ancient culture believed they were communicating with men from the sky. Ezekiel with spinning wheels of fire landing and creatures with blue space helmets approaching Ezekiel and giving him a drug to take, and then he has wild hallucinations. One could say that Prometheus is simply art imitating life and putting a 21st century spin on the beliefs of the Dogon tribe in Africa and the Aztecs of Mesoamerica. Eric von Däniken, more than any other living person, has popularized the idea of chariots of the gods and that our planet has been visited and manipulated by off-world creatures for thousands of years. But the systems that he popularized were regurgitated whole cloth from ideas developed by the ruling class of this planet. And I want to be clear, every major globalist we look at, going back more than 160 years, is completely and totally obsessed with the idea that off-world aliens are controlling this planet and giving them hidden knowledge. By the 1870s, T.H. Huxley Group and their X Club was dominating the Royal Society in England. The dominant theory within the X Club was that humans had been seeded here, along with most other life forms, by advanced beings from space. From the inception of Darwin's theory on the origin of species, evolutionary scientists never believed for a minute that life simply started on its own. That evolution is not some random, slow system developing by chance, but is actually directed by off-world seeders, terraformers, creators of worlds. Even the discoverer of DNA, Francis Crick, promotes the idea that life was seeded on this planet in what he calls directed panspermia. It is part of the larger myth of transhumanism. Huxley, Darwin, Wedgwood, the Galtons, they all interbred in an attempt to create this transcendent Superman. The governing class of this globe believes that they are channeling advanced technological systems given to them by ancient alien species. And the science fiction of the last 150 years, whether it's Jules Verne or H.G. Wells or those that came before them, is obsessed with this, and they're on record part of secret societies who believe what they're promoting is actually reality, but knowing that the public is not ready to accept it, they cover it under the guise of fiction. And the film Prometheus is completely constructed around the secret religion of the Illuminati, who believe that they are transcendent and becoming the Superman.
We can create cybernetic individuals. We are the gods now.
Blurring the lines between fiction and reality, we see a futuristic presentation of the technology conference TED. The keynote speaker is the founder of the Wayland Corporation, Mr. Wayland. There he describes Prometheus stealing fire from the gods.
From the Titan Prometheus, our first true piece of technology, fire.
The transference of fire, or the first technology to man, is only the beginning of his transgressions. Prometheus is a Titan and the creator of mankind who attempts to elevate humans to the level of gods and is punished. The Illuminati believe they have stolen the fire of true genius from the gods.
Biotech, nanotech, fusion.
As man attempts to become godlike, we release potential forces that can and probably will destroy us. I want to say this in summation. We're not facing off-world genetic engineers that the elite believes created this planet, whether that's true or not. We're facing the global technocrats that are splicing every plant and animal and insect you can imagine together, that are creating chimeras with hundreds of species within them, giving rise to superviruses and bacterial mutations. We are already seeing within 3 generations in rodents total sterilization and massive deformities in these animals. And we have proven from the Rockefeller Foundation documents and other reports that this is part of a long-term program to wreck the general public's DNA. This is the global elite who have fantasized about off-world genetic engineers, creating them actually in a 160-year-plus program, developing the sciences and technologies to put this into place. Whatever you say about the Illuminati, they have got patience and they have had incredible vision. But I believe humanity needs to hear the truth and understand that this is being carried out against us all. Because we have a choice to stand up now, but only a short window, and say no. I know the plot of the film. I know how it ends. But I'm going to leave that for you to discover. The point is, the film itself is only a revelation of the method, an externalization of the hierarchy. In the 1950s, Universal Pictures put out a classic sci-fi horror film, The Thing. And it's been likened to a carrot from outer space they dig up in the snow that had crashed in Antarctica on the South Pole of this planet, dug it up, and then it was basically a shapeshifter that would devour its prey and then copy them. And then, of course, they had the John Carpenter classic in 1982, which is probably one of the best sci-fi horror films ever made, in my humble opinion. But you see, we live in the real world, and truth is stranger than fiction. No, we haven't had an alien that crashed millions of years ago in Antarctica that's been thawed out and is now at a research facility absorbing the crew with an eye towards invading the mainland and taking over the entire biosphere of the planet Earth. No, 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 that's not happening. And of course, they're now re-releasing basically a remake of the 1982 from the reviews I've read. No, I'm talking about the real thing, the real deal. I'm talking about genetic engineers, transhumanists, working for the globalist, who in their own words admit, going back to the 1970s, that they had a plan to patent every major food crop and then every major life form, prolific life form on this planet, and put artificial genes, genetics, DNA, RNA into them to manipulate viruses, bacteria. And now that's been done with tens of thousands of different species. In some cases, hundreds of different species are being spliced together. You know about spider goats that are part goat, part spider that produce body armor in their milk. You've read about the super salmon that university studies have shown will extinct the normal salmon that are in the ocean. And these salmon, different varieties, have been mixed with other fish, insects, plants. The list goes on and on. You see, that's the real thing. You're eating corn, you're eating a GMO potato, and it's had insect genes and other traits added to it. It's had pharmacological traits in the BT corn and other crops where a pesticide is engineered to grow inside the corn to where field mice and insects can't eat it. If they do, they die. But then you are fed this. My point is, as we prepare to enter 2012, we have a global ruling class that are playing God and who, quite frankly, don't know what they're doing. I mean, they were able to foresee with their futurists and their think tanks, hiring the top minds in the world, what could be done. But they are endangering the planet itself while constantly distracting the public with fake environmental crises like carbon dioxide that is 0.0360 of the atmosphere. The New World Order, simply put, are people trying to play God. They've studied how humans operate as if they were an alien coming here from a foreign planet. They have funded literally hundreds and hundreds of universities for more than 150 years to study every facet of psychological, spiritual, physical processes that take place. And they have tested and refined incredible tools of social control, propaganda, chemical control through the water and food supply. This is all on record. The globalists have also, for at least 80 years, engaged in lethal chemical and biological as well as radiological tests on prisoners, foster children, military personnel. The list goes on and on. You know about injecting people with syphilis. You know about the horrors of children being radiated by the thousands in atomic studies. You know about forced sterilizations going on right into the 1980s, or at least you should know about that. That is only the tip of the iceberg. And it's being done to test these systems, but also to test the personnel and to create larger pools of individuals that will carry out these type of activities because they enjoy the power, because they believe the end justifies the means. The point is, the global ruling class believe they are a separate species from us and openly write about this. They believe they have transcended the common man and are actively trying to poison and also socially dumb down the general population so that we will fit in to the mold and the typecast that they've made for us. So when you see movies like John Carpenter's classic or this new one that just came out, remember that the real world is a lot stranger than what Hollywood screenwriters can come up with. And sure, it's not as sexy, it's not as shocking as a young heroine fighting the monster from deep space. And there aren't bodies splitting apart and spewing out tentacles with razor-sharp teeth. And heroes standing up to it with flamethrowers and dynamite. No, in this war, the thing, the globalist system of control is simply taking over species after species, infecting every major food crop, every staple food animal, and splicing new systems into their DNA that irrevocably spread into the entire family. Take the case of corn, going back over a decade, close to 90% of all known corn varieties, and there are thousands originating in Mexico, have now been infected. And the latest numbers I saw is that there is no known major cultivated crop, unless it's in closed laboratories, that has not been infected. Everything is being infected. So in the thing, it shows under an electron microscope the alien cells metastasizing and taking over the natural cells of the husky or of the human that it's infected. But in reality, this is already happening to us. But it doesn't happen right away. You see, if a GMO crop was put out that caused people to mutate and bleed out and die or turn into something else right in front of you, you would recognize it as a threat. But because it's a slow, creeping, methodical death, you're not aware of it. We're designed to face a frontal assault, a saber-toothed cat jumping out against a troop of hunting Cro-Magnon. We are not designed to deal with poison that's been added into our environment. We're designed to just basically adapt to it or die. And so the globalists have developed a very, very sophisticated, soft kill, incremental, ambient, genetic Armageddon takeover system where it just slowly is ramped up. If you look, please, for you and your family's sake, and for the future of this planet and the life forms that developed here over untold eons, there is a total revolution by the, quote, scientific class in their lust for power, in their lust for extended life, in their lust for super weapons to dominate the globe. They have already opened up 1,000 times 1,000 Pandora's boxes. And if you just look at the admitted studies in guinea pigs, rats, mice, dogs, monkeys, where the life cycles are in weeks, months, or years, instead of human life cycles being in around 76 years, in every major study within 3 generations with every major GMO crop where they've had cross-species splicing and genetic chimera cross-clone manipulation, in every case within 3 generations, the genitals shrivel up to nothing. Fertility goes down to almost 0.
Those that ate the genetically engineered soy, they didn't actually show the problems in the first generation. The second generation was slower growth, slower onset for maturity, but by the third generation, that's when nearly all of the adults had lost the ability to have babies.
There are more horror movie type mutations where most of the young are born dead or deformed, or the young are born small, mentally retarded, with hair growing out of their mouths, eyeballs on the back of their head. And within 3 generations, it does get like a John Carpenter movie, The Thing. This is not by accident. They stack these traits, and genetic engineers that we've interviewed who work for these companies have said, hey, this potato is sterilizing the rats. They're like, don't worry about that trait. Just move ahead. So there are Trojan horse traits that have been added to all of these. This is 21st century warfare. And of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg when we talk about chimeras and cross-species clones and the island of Dr. Moreau type things that are happening that H.G. Wells predicted over 100 years ago would come to fruition. The real revolution, and why the globalists are so arrogant, is they've created new classes of vaccines. They call them vaccines. That's a diversion. They're really genetically engineered nanotech, and they advertise it. Soon, we've already developed it, but soon we're going to get approval, they say, of a vaccine where you'll never be angry, you'll never be sad, or you'll never want to drink alcohol or use cocaine, because the virus actually goes in and changes your brain chemistry. Listen to me. The facts are in. Please, for your own sake and the sake of our species, let's not let these control freak psychopaths mutilate and vandalize and irrevocably damage the biosphere and the ancient genetic system of this planet so they can be on a power trip and play God. Look at the fruits of the New World Order. Most cancers have more than tripled in the last 2 decades. Diabetes has doubled in the last decade. All sorts of new cancers that never existed before are now appearing. Scores of vaccines have been found to be implanted with sterilants, cancer viruses, microplasms, nanotech microplasms that are purely artificial. The United States has the highest rates of every major cancer in the world, including breast cancer. And the system always talks about giving more money when you buy food or go to a movie to try to create cures for breast cancer, instead of finding out why it's all skyrocketing, why pancreatic cancer is skyrocketing, and why the system's trying to block vitamins and minerals from the public. Again, the globalist might as well be a space alien from 15 trillion miles away who crashed in Antarctica and got dug up and wants to wreck this planet and totally genetically absorb it. Like John Carpenter's The Thing. Might as well be. The globalist covered up the fact that Fukushima was many times Chernobyl and that the radiation levels were rising all across the United States. And so the EPA's response was just to raise the level of isotopes, in some cases 100,000 times what they said was previously safe. This is the type of self-destructive, truly demonic is the only word to describe it, behavior that we see coming out of the ruling class. And it's time for people infected by cynicism and by a hatred of life to really ask yourself, is this what you want to be part of? The things that the globalists create are malformed abominations. The entire biosphere is being absorbed. It may already be irreversible. The life cycle of these rats and mice and guinea pigs is just a few years. And within 3 generations, near total infertility and addled mental retardation, total deformities, stillbirths, just a wreck species. We are eating the same stuff, but on average, we have offspring every 20 years. And already look at the mental retardation, all the new problems, all the new cancers, the diseases, and we are just 1 generation into this. The mercury alone in the vaccines, major study shows, is causing massive, irrevocable DNA damage that we're already seeing in this generation of your 25 years or so. The numbers are off the chart, but it's damaging the eggs of the girls that are being born now. And they've got cadaver studies on young children that have died, young girls, and they've looked at their eggs. They're nearly infertile. If an alien from a foreign planet wanted to come in and infiltrate and destroy humanity, it couldn't do a better job than the globalists have done. All right, you've been warned. Now we will break down the secret of Hunger Games, set more than 100 years in the future after America has been collapsed, is an artificial system where the population has been turned into feudal slaves living at a subsistence level. It is the essence of Agenda 21. The suboid slaves are played off against each other in gladiatorial diversions. This is directly out of the Globalist Handbook. There you've got Mr. Sutherland, one of my favorite actors, on a jumbotron screen in a police state dystopic future at the Hall of Justice. Already at Walmart's, Mall of America, and thousands of locations, giant jumbotrons are there with Big Sis, a asexual creature, telling us that we all need to give our rights up because terrorists, Al-Qaeda namely, that they publicly fund to attack other nations, is hiding under every desk wanting to get us. Now, continuing here with this film, now that I've had a chance to research it and go over it, this is really a piece of anti-establishment propaganda. Because you've got the 10 FEMA regions, the 10 governors, this plan globally to have 10 regions with 10 sub-regions per sector across the world. This is really the UN model. And when you read the biological diversity assessments, they talk about bringing back gladiatorial games to teach people to fight with each other, not with the state, and having big centralized governments over the 10 global regions with 10 sub-regions per region and you have a central government per 10 regions that plays the sub-10 regions off against each other via gladiatorial games. So the writer of this fiction book, she's really got a deep understanding. And by the way, we're going to end up contacting her. We're trying now, but seeing the film, I can guarantee you that if she's not an InfoWars reader and Alex Jones listener, that she is a deep researcher into the New World Order and the system they want to set up, because the 1996 UN Biological Diversity Assessment, I covered it in my 2002 film, Road to Tyranny, says they would have gladiatorial games, reintroduce human sacrifice, teach the people to fight with each other. Now, this film is basically, from my notes, Robin Hood meets Romeo and Juliet meets 1984. And it is Agenda 21, where the central government over the subregions is artificially cutting off resources and executing, imprisoning and executing people who were caught killing a rabbit, killing a deer so they get food for their family. And the society has been artificially collapsed so that everybody is dependent on the central government that has the resources. You're not allowed to farm or ranch for your own good. This is what the New World Order is about. This is what Agenda 21, Behind the Green Mask, and the book that we sell at InfoWars.com breaks down. This is what the corporatocracy is calling for. This is what Maurice Strong in 1992 and now this year is calling for, a post-industrial world with these high-tech reservations that are government and corporations, with the rest of us living in squalor outside of that, but unified by television broadcast of the giant gladiatorial games. Now, in part 2 and now part 3 coming out, the books, I haven't gotten to those yet. I'm talking to fans of it, though. I've got friends and family that are. It's more of a message of revolution against this. So Hollywood, in its desperate attempt to stay relevant, is more and more adopting the culture of resistance to these eugenics, post-industrial, deindustrialization cult, and people are really starting to wake up. So that is exciting, and we'll have some more reports and reviews on the Hunger Games. Also saw a film on DVD that I think is pretty impressive called In Time, with Justin Timberlake of all people, but it is a powerful message of the elite being able to live forever, but needing to reduce population to do it because you can't have too many people. That's also what this is all about. And we're also going to be reviewing here with a sneak peek months before it's out, coming up this Thursday, Prometheus, the Ridley Scott film. So you want to stay with us on that. But, you know, I wrote a lot of notes here. I kept hearing about the Hunger Games, too busy to get focused on it. Now I've had a chance to see it. It's got Woody Harrelson in it as one of the trainers of the people that are involved, as one of the winners of the Hunger Games, where you've got, again, children, the youth, being sacrificed by the central government in a gladiatorial event. That's the tropism developed by every other authoritarian system in history, whether it was the Aztecs, the Babylonians, the Greeks had human sacrifice, the Romans, that's what the gladiatorial events were. Now, all of this, human sacrifice in every single culture, ritualized warfare, because the elites are basically culling the population. This is an ancient truth, and that's why Hunger Games is so powerful. Any film that is extremely successful has a couple things behind it. A, the system pushes it, but more importantly, B, it has to trigger archetypal truths that we already know are there. And finally, it has to be presented in a powerful fashion. And so I'm not saying Hunger Games is even good in the final equation, because the system has put it out to people. They believe the public's so dumbed down, this will condition people to accept this future, which is what the UN and others are actually pushing. It's incredible. This is something they're actually pushing, a rewilding, going back to primitive times, gladiatorial events, human sacrifice. The UN actually calls for this, cutting off resources artificially to control populations, because a true renaissance of clean energy, new systems, free energy systems threatens the monopoly. So the elite who are facing that are deciding to go into a new dark age where they have life extension and they have all these new systems, but that's blocked off from us. We're in a new dark age. They ascend to the next level with the Promethean fire. That is their plan. The question is, will you let them do that? You see, they know that you can never be given access to any of this or even know that it exists, or you'll completely rebel and they'll lose their monopoly of power through the technological revolution. Because technology's a multifaceted sword with hundreds of edges. It's not just double-edged, good or evil. It has a fractal design of 6 dimensions of possibilities, and we make the future. That's why they want us walled off in this matrix-like system of American Idol and NFL, totally feeling inadequate via the Madison Avenue brainwashing system, with endless recruiting ads showing women rebelling against their boyfriend by shaving their heads and marrying the state and joining the Marine Corps. We're going to show that tomorrow night. I mean, sick stuff. So you can be injected with binary weapon systems and die young and be chewed up by DU. The system wants to destroy the family, so we all marry the state and join the hive collective that uses us as human resources. Another term hidden in plain view. So again, the system thinks they're throwing it in your face and you're weak, and you'll just accept this as what's coming. I believe that when you see the facts, you will be enlightened and take action against the globalist. You're like, well, how do I bring them down? You don't bring them down by yourself. You resist, you rebel in small ways, and we kill them by 1 trillion cuts. The globalists are doing that to us incrementally. We resist them incrementally as well. Resistance is victory. Let me give you tonight's quote here with this jumbo edition of InfoWars Nightly News. Okay, so tonight's quote is from Bob LaFavre, a Alex Jones of decades ago who's now deceased. Government is a disease masquerading as its own cure. And he's the father of the Freedom School. He founded that, and we stand on people like Bob's shoulders. So we commend you, Bob, for all your work, and we say hi to you. They're watching from Valhalla. And I wanted tonight to get into an iconic film, and that, of course, is Clockwork Orange, based on the novel A Clockwork Orange. And, of course, Stanley Kubrick directed this in 1971. I had said 1973. So now we'll go ahead and get into that review. In closing, in the film A Clockwork Orange, it is a 2015 or so world. There's a giant welfare class, huge levels of crime. Spoiled, rotten hippies have given birth to children who then gave birth in turn to kind of a Generation X crowd that just likes to loot and rob and steal and is obsessed with taking psychotropic drugs. And in the film, there are political dissidents who are aware of the Pavlovian brainwashing that's going on who are against it, but they end up getting shut up and framed and sent to prison for exposing what's happening. It gets into television being used as a operant conditioning mind control device. In this first little clip I have, it's Stanley Kubrick starring Malcolm McDowell, Warner Brothers, based on a novel by Anthony Burgess, 1962, again came out in 1971. And we'll go ahead and go to the first part of the movie review, again, where you have the thugs out beating the poor old bum. You've got the society breaking down, nobody caring about anything.
Where I lived was with my dada and mum in Municipal Flat Block 18A, Linear North.
Okay, so this is basically the social engineers letting you know what they're planning and what they are setting up. Continuing here, this is a key clip where the Minister of the Interior is touring the prison, discusses overcrowding and hardening, says government may soon need space for political prisoners, so they need to clean out the actual violent prisoners, wants to release common criminals. And Alex, that's the name of the gang leader, speaks up and is chosen for the brainwashing MK Ultra experiment to cure him of his psychopathic desires. And of course, the movie's all about the state being run by psychopaths. Let's go ahead and go to that clip.
Cram criminals together, and what do you get? Concentrated criminality. Crime in the midst of punishment.
I agree, sir. What we need are larger prisons, more money.
Not a chance, my dear fellow. The government can't be concerned any longer with outmoded penological theories. Soon we may be needing all our prison space for political offenders. Common criminals like these are best dealt with on a purely curative basis. Kill the criminal reflex, that's all. Full implementation in a year's time.
Now, you also notice that there's a subliminal image there, but at the end of this piece, I'll point it out. Nurse explains the Ludovico treatment is about to begin. Just watch the films, and we're going to administer a vitamin injection. Alex describes straitjacket, lid locks, and brain monitor cables. So here's a clip of that.
Now, in a few minutes, you'll meet Dr. Brodsky, and we'll begin your treatment.
What exactly is the treatment here going to be, then?
Oh, it's quite simple, really. We're just going to show you some films.
Where I was taken to, brothers, was like no cine I ever visited before. I was bound up in a straitjacket, and my Gulliver was strapped to a headrest with like wires running away from it. Then they clamped like lid locks on my eyes so that I could not shut them, no matter how hard I tried.
All right, now after the week-long brainwashing, and again, you get a softer form of this through the television, so people now have convulsions watching certain shows when they turn the flicker rate up too much. This is where an actor assaults him and he's unable to resist it. And this is kind of the learned helplessness that the general public is actually put through. And this is why this film's so sophisticated. It shows that this treatment makes good people unable to defend themselves, and that it makes bad people unable at the low level to operate as they truly are, so that the super psychopaths above have a group of helpless minions under them. Let's go to that clip.
I began to feel really sick, but I could not shut my glasses.
Very soon now, the drug will cause the subject to experience a death-like paralysis, together with deep feelings of terror. And it is during this period we have found that the subject will make his most rewarding associations between his catastrophic experience environment and the violence he sees.
Okay, and then here's the clip where they're testing out his conditioning.
If you want to get up, you got to do something for me. Here. Is it that you? Well, I want you to lick it. Go on! Lick it.
Would you believe your faithful friend and long-suffering narrator pushed out his red Yazik 1.5 miles to lick the Grasny Vonny boots?
And again!
The horrible killing sickness had whooshed up.
Okay, here's the prison chaplain who's observed this, pointing out that he has lost his free will and that he's been rendered into basically an automaton.
He ceases to be a wrongdoer. He ceases also to be a creature capable of moral choice.
Padre, these are subtleties. We're not concerned with motives, with a higher ethics. We are concerned only with cutting down crime. And with relieving the ghastly congestion in our prisons. He will be your true Christian, ready to turn the other cheek.
Okay, continuing with this teleprompter-free news and film analysis. Now he's been released after being brainwashed, and he's unable to defend himself when he's assaulted. He's unable to desire a woman, and then they actually have this Pavlovian conditioning aversion treatment, what they call it, a subset. The same homeless alcoholics, the hobos that he'd beaten up, they find him, they beat him up, and his old gang member friends show up. They're now police officers. That's a clip we should have played. In the film, they describe the revolutionaries who are writing the novel A Clockwork Orange. That's what the film's named after. They describe how the state and the wedge of authoritarianism and totalitarianism is coming in are hiring the criminals to be the new police force, which is what Stalin and Hitler and others actually did. And we'll get to a clip later where he speaks out against this you know, the people that are speaking out against this actually get arrested and imprisoned for trying to write the novel exposing the state's general mind control program. Very sophisticated novel. That's why Kubrick picked it up, because it's based on what was really going on at the time and a projection of where we'd be today. Okay, let's go ahead and go to Alex rescued and then beaten by his old Droog gang, now police. Here it is.
Back away! All away with you! What's the trouble, sir? Oh, no! Well! It's impossible! I don't believe it!
Evidence of the old glasses. Nothing up our sleeve. No magic, little Alex. A job for two, who are now of job 8.
And we have the next clip where they waterboard him, which we've now been taught is what the good guys do. One of the oldest forms of torture, simulated asphyxiation via dihydrogen monoxide. Here it is.
This is to make sure you stay cured.
Oh, the good guys. What the good guys do. That goes on and on. Here's another clip. Minister visits Alex after he's picked up, tortured, breaks his conditioning, near death and reprogramming, says never meant harm. And of course, you realize the minister is a psychopath just like little Alex. Will provide a good job for Alex if he gives pro-government press. And they've put away the subversive writer who in the novel, Clockwork Orange, is writing the novel, A Clockwork Orange, about the giant mind control society and how the state's hiring criminals and how the state is run by criminals. So here is that clip.
Let me help you with that, shall I?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I can tell you with all sincerity that I and the government of which I'm a member are deeply sorry about this, my boy. Deeply sorry. We tried to help you. There is also a certain man, a writer of subversive literature, who has been howling for your blood. He's been mad with desire to stick a knife into you. But you're safe from him now. We put him away.
Now, in closing here at the end of the nightly news that we first covered the FEMA camps, we started the show, of course, where I was actually live, not just taping this before we went live. We're so busy covering the news, we're like a snake eating itself. We meet back, you know, at where we began. We have a couple subliminals from the film. It's got hundreds of them in it, but I thought I'd point out subliminals that speak to your subconscious from Stanley Kubrick. First off, we have a pyramid with capstone on prison wall with the pyramid actually being elevated, and we'll put that subliminal up on screen. Multiple scenes of that. See the pyramid there on the back wall with the risen capstone above it. And there's another semi-subliminal when he comes in to get his Ludwig von Beethoven music. You see 2001 Space Odyssey there. And then, of course, there's another one. Officer Dim has badge 665, unavoidably referencing 666, or the Beast, with the Beast about to be fulfilled. I mean, it's just absolutely chocked full of it in that 1971 Clockwork Orange, and that's only the tip of the iceberg, as they say. Tomorrow night, 7 days in May, and more and more, I'm going to just show you where all this is inculcated in our media. Some people do it to warn you. Others do it to condition you. Others do it just to have a laugh with their friends. But most of it, it's about revelation of the method, because the establishment believes it's important for you to know what's being done to you, at least at a subconscious level, before they do it. Now I want to go to a movie review. We did Clockwork Orange, on Tuesday night, and here on Friday night, I have 8 different clips from an amazing 1964 film, 7 Days in May. Now, it's got globalist propaganda in it, but it shows how the leftists that made this were useful idiots. The evil general that wants to use the NAS, National Alert FEMA system, this was in 64 before that was set up, to take over, he has basically set up the military to use this emergency alert system as a pretext to take over. And he speaks out against the one worlders and the New World Order. So now the idea back then was, because this was true, some generals were going to do a coup against the New World Order communists and bankers. And so they were worried back then, so they used a Smedley Butler type 30 years after he did it. The Marine Corps officer in the fictitious film playing Smedley Butler, basically, to say no to martial law and warn the president. And so that's basically what Mr. Douglas does. And so we're going to go ahead and go to those clips, but I just want to illustrate to you that they just had Dr. Strangelove the year before in 63 exposing government launching a nuclear attack on itself, basically, as a pretext for martial law and global domination. And then another film comes out a year later where they talk about generals using COG or Plan R to take over the government. And so we're going to go ahead and go to that first clip of the Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, Paramount Pictures, based on the 62 novel by Fletcher Cannell and Charles Bailey II, 7 Days in May. Here's that first clip.
Lyman lovers!
So there's protesters in America. People are angry. Americans are fighting progressives, but the right winger wants to come save everybody. Of course, now it's the left coming in to supplant free speech. So again, the globalists were coming in to take over America. They knew the military was upset, so they put movies out about right-wingers using a martial law system. Right-wing, left-wing means nothing, but now, in common terms, they're actually implementing all of this, but now the left, in their own labels, is using this system against us. They become what they warned about. Let's go ahead and go to this clip of Gene Scott's speech, excerpts where they basically, well, I mean, the clip speaks for itself. Here it is.
Perhaps patriotism is old-fashioned. Perhaps love of country is outdated. Perhaps even a minute degree of sentiment to one's motherland is to be considered passé. But God help us, and God help our country, if the cynics, the one-worlders, the intellectual dilettantes ever persuade us that these things have passed us by. Because, ladies and gentlemen, patriotism, loyalty, sentiment, they are the United States of America.
So there you go. That's General Scott. I'm not a teleprompter reader. I call it Gene Scott. Another General Scott's speech excerpts. He talks about the threat of one-worlders. He's going to bring in martial law to stop the communist one-worlders. But they're not communists for the little guy. They're the banksters. Let's go to this next clip. It's self-explanatory.
Mr. President, have you ever heard of a military unit known as ECOMCON?
What?
I'm sorry, ECOMCON. ECOMCON.
This is Smedley Butler.
What does it mean?
The archetype warning them.
Abbreviations. It could stand for Emergency Communications Control. Have you ever authorized the formation of any type of secret unit, regardless of its name, that has something to do with the preserving the security of things like television, telephone, or radio?
No, I haven't.
Henderson said an odd thing to me, sir. Something that, well, I can't shake quite loose of. He said they were spending more time training for seizing than for preventing.
You're suggesting what?
I'm not sure, Mr. President. Just some possibilities, what we call capabilities in military intelligence. I'm suggesting, Mr. President, there's a military plot to take over the government. This may occur sometime this coming Sunday.
So you stand by the Constitution, Jakes?
Never thought of it just like that, Mr. President, but well, that's what we've got, and I guess it's worked pretty well so far. I sure don't want to be the one to say we ought to change it.
Neither do I. I remember what Harry Truman said one day, that inside this room,
the buck stops.
So again, it's the evil anti-New World Order people that want to overthrow the government using the COG media takeover arm that they'd set up to a certain extent then, but wasn't in place till the 70s. And then now that they've got it, they're saying domestic terrorist, free speech is evil. But that's how they sell it. And again, it's the archetype of the Marine Corps officer saying no. S. Smedley Butler, two-time Congressional Medal of Honor winner, he was approached during the 30s to make America basically a fascist country and take over. The point is, this has already happened through Homeland Security and the staged terror attacks of 9/11. Now they're just mopping up all the free speech centers and shutting down the final levels of freedom. Okay, let's go ahead with the presidential advisor telling the president that, hey, you know, what's wrong with the military training for this stuff?
Forgive me, Mr. President, but it's flying troops to the big cities in an alert. That seems to be not only logical, but prudent. Obviously, if the Russians struck, we'd need disciplined troops in the metropolitan areas to keep order and prevent complete breakdown.
And at 2:20 tomorrow afternoon, somebody will have thrown a switch at Mount Thunder. General James Scott will be on all 3 television networks, explain to the people of the United States why this particular crucifixion is an act of faith.
Mr. President, what are you waiting for? Fire Scott. Close down Mount Thunder. Declare a state of martial law.
Then where do I stand?
And that's another good point. When different groups try to take over, then the answer is martial law, which is the same thing. So there's a great danger in revolution. And that's the point that's made there. A very sophisticated film. You can rent it on Netflix or buy it at the movie store. The point is you should see 7 Days in May. Continuing here with the clips. We had clip number 5 and number 6 here. Yeah, this is General Scott asked the Marine Corps commander if he'll go along with this or if he stands for the Constitution. And when the Marine Corps commander says, I stand for the Constitution, he says, then you take a vacation. That's basically how the system finds good and evil people. If you're good and they have you answer a questionnaire, they say, oh, you're a good person now. We're going to put you in supply or Antarctica. But if you're a corrupt globalist, then they actually bring you in to run operations. Here's that clip.
This country's in trouble, Jiggs. Deep trouble. Now, there are 2 ways we can handle this. We can sit here on our duffs and ask for divine guidance. Or we can watch, Jiggs. What would your advice be?
Well, sir, we're a nation of laws, of rules. We're military men, so we've taken an oath to uphold the Constitution.
The democratic way.
Yes, sir, the democratic way.
You're right, Jiggs. You're absolutely right. You know, Jiggs, you've been working too hard on this damned alert. You look tired. Why don't you take the rest of the week off?
Unbelievable. Let's continue here. This has always been a threat to our country, folks, and now we're up to the line here. It's really happening. It's not a movie. Here's another clip where the President of the United States confronts General Scott on establishing secret base without knowledge of the President, the budget office in Congress, Iran-Contra, all of that, the black sites, the torture sites around the world. And there's a succession of clips while they debate that. Here it is.
You have used, without my authority, substantial sums from the Joint Chiefs Contingency Fund to establish a base and to train a special unit of troops whose purpose and even whose existence was kept secret from me, from responsible officials of the Bureau of the Budget, and members of the Congress.
And the name of that unit?
You know the unit. Its designation is ECOMCON. You accuse me of having lost their faith, and deliberately and criminally shut my ears to the national voice.
I do.
Where the hell have you heard that voice, General? In dark alleys? In secret places in the dead of night? How did that voice seep into a locked room full of conspirators? That's not where you hear the voice of the people, General, not in this republic. You want to defend the United States of America, then defend it with the tools it supplies you with, its Constitution. You ask for a mandate, General, from a ballot box. You don't steal it after midnight.
And then there's a clip where a senator tries to get into the secret base and gets locked up and they get out. Here's a clip of that.
Right now, the government of the United States is sitting on top of the Washington Monument, right on the very point, tipping right and left and ready to fall off and break up on a pavement. There are just a handful of men who can prevent that. And you're one of them. I'm going to tell you the damnedest story you ever heard.
That's all for tonight, Sergeant. You're relieved. I'm taking the civilian in my custody.
I'm sorry, Colonel, but I have orders that the civilian is not to leave the base, sir.
Oh, that's all right, Sergeant. I'm countermanding those orders and escorting the civilian into town.
Well, sir, now, I don't know. Colonel Broderick said that
Throw those keys over here. Eject that cartridge belt and throw it down on the ground.
Do we have people today that blow the whistle on government corruption? Yeah, Pat Tillman did, and they killed him. Point is, we've got the same problems today, but people blew the whistle inside the ATF and the government shipping guns into Mexico to blame the Second Amendment. We'd be in a lot worse shape today if it wasn't for all those silent people that did their duty. I won't even call them heroes. This idea of doing the right thing, it's not heroic, okay? Doing the right thing is not heroic. It's self-preservation. It's common sense. It's a survival instinct. If you let somebody enslave a bunch of innocent people or kill a bunch of innocent people, then you would allow that to yourself. It's common sense. It's not wimpy to have empathy, to feel somebody's pain. It's normal. It's a human instinct. And it's because we've gotten accustomed to going along with other people's pain as long as it's not us. That's weakened us all. That's where you lose your humanity, your womanhood, your manhood. And I'm not giving mine up. My feelings are my strength, not a weakness like these psychopaths tell us. I want my feelings. I see things and know things they'll never know because I'm tied into the universe. I'm not here to stomp on a bunch of innocents. Let's go to this final clip here. This is the ending. We're going to go to this in a moment. This is the ending of the clip where the general's basically been confronted.
And then we'll see which one of us the United States will follow. This will be delivered at 9 o'clock tonight on all major networks. I'll be taping it in 1 hour.
This is strong stuff, General. Are you sure?
Thank you, General.
General, if he accuses us of sedition, whether he has the proof or not, this could be a pretty sticky business.
Jordan Lyman is finished.
The papers just handed me are the resignations of Generals Hardesty, Riley, and Diefenbach.
The point of this treaty, and I've reiterated this on a number of occasions, is that in every true sense, we force ourselves gradually to step away from an offensive posture. We gradually move away from that that moment of madness.
Where to, sir?
By accident or design, someone would push that button and the...
Sir?
Take me home.
So basically, it all ends with he tries to launch martial law. His own generals say no. The president confronts him. He backs off. The president goes public. But what do you do when the president's been bought off by the same interest? You know, this is a movie about the military saying no to the globalist takeover. They were worried about that then. That can be turned around today. Will our military follow the globalist takeover of the Bill of Rights and Constitution?
Why do people obey authority? Well, we wanted to highlight something that applies across the board, a study that was actually conducted to find out why people obeyed Nazi orders to exterminate people in camps, the Milgram experiment from 1961, but it just generally shows why people obey authority in the first place. It was conducted by the Yale University psychologist Stanley Milgram. It was a mock memory study where they had a punishment syndrome. They told the survey participants it would help people remember answers better in a memory test. But of course, it was really to find out if people would obey orders to electrocute in the experiment. Now, it was all mock. They didn't actually electrocute people, but it goes to show that they would obey the person running the experiment who told them to go ahead with the shocks. Now, we have a few clips from that experiment now. Let's go to the first one.
When I learn of incidents such as the massacre of millions of men, women, and children perpetrated by the Nazis in World War II, how is it possible, I ask myself, that ordinary people who are courteous and decent in everyday life can act callously, inhumanely, without any limitations of conscience? What is there in human nature that allows an individual to act without any restraints whatsoever?
It was the issue of authority. Under what conditions would a person obey authority who commanded actions that went against conscience? These are exactly the questions that I wanted to investigate at Yale University.
So as you see, they're asking, what is it that makes people obey authority? And of course, they found out it's basically just that people are willing guinea pigs for anything a so-called authority in a lab coat or a state government authority suit will tell them to do. Let's go to another clip now.
Now, as teacher, you were seated in front of this impressive-looking instrument, the shock generator. Its essential feature is a line of switches that goes from 15 volts to 450 volts, and a set of verbal designations that goes from slight shock to moderate shock, strong shock, very strong shock, intense shock, extreme intensity shock, and finally XXX, danger severe shock. If he gets each answer correctly, fine, you move on to the next pair. But if he makes a mistake, you are instructed to give him an electric shock, starting with 15 volts, and you increase the shock one step on each error.
Incorrect. 150 volts. Sad face.
Wait a minute. That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble.
But I wouldn't go on if I thought he was being harmed.
Now, this man makes disobedience seem a very rational and simple deed. Now, other subjects respond quite differently to the experimenter's authority.
Wrong. It's hair. 75 volts, Jim. You don't know. Please continue. 150 volts.
Experiment. That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble. My heart's starting to bother me now. Let me out of here. You have no right to keep me here. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out.
Continue, please.
Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let me out. Let me out.
Responsible for it. That is incorrect. This will be at 3:30. The correct phrase is rich boy.
Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let me out, I tell you. Let me out of here. Let me out of here. You have no right to hold me.
Answer is duck. 435 volts. It says danger, severe shock here. Next X on the next one. Continue, please. 435 volts. Next one, brave.
So that's just a few clips from some of the available films of the Milgram study conducted in 1961. The interesting thing here is that they found that 82.5% of people went to 150 volts. Now, as they mentioned, it started at 15 volts, went all the way up to 450 volts, which is considered lethal. And people took those orders, 82%. More than 4 out of 5 at the 150-volt level, at which they first issued the cry of pain. They pre-recorded the cries of pain because it wasn't a real electrocution for each participant. Now, while a few people refused, they still found that of the 82.5% who went to 150 volts and continued, 79% of those, another 4 out of 5, went all the way to the lethal end of the line, 450 volts, obeying the authority. You heard some of the clips in there where the experimenter tells them, go ahead. Some of them ask who's going to take responsibility if something happens to the person on the other side. They say it's all good, just go ahead, and people obey. Now, they did a replication in 2008 under the Berger study where they found nearly the same results. At least 70% of the participants had to be stopped continuing past 150 volts. For some reason, they decided not to mimic the exact experiment, but it still brings into light that people obey orders. It's very similar, in fact, to what Aldous Huxley said in one of his last speeches, the Ultimate Revolution speech at Berkeley. and other similar speeches in his book, Brave New World Revisited, that really only at most about 20% of people are capable of independent thought. The rest either can't think for themselves at all statistically or tend to obey orders, while there is some gray area there. Now, there's another experiment on obedience to authority. It was conducted almost a decade later in 1971 at Stanford University. That is the Stanford Prison Experiment conducted by Philip G. Zimbardo. I want to read his introduction. Welcome to the Stanford Prison Experiment website. It features an extensive slideshow of the information about the classic psychology experiment, including parallels with the abuse of prisoners at Abu Ghraib. What happens when you put good people in an evil place? Does humanity win over evil, or does evil triumph? These are some of the questions we pose in the dramatic simulation of prison life conducted in the summer of '71 at Stanford University. They planned a 2-week investigation into the psychology of prison life, but it had to end prematurely after only 6 days because the guards became sadistic and the prisoners became depressed and showed signs of extreme stress. Let's go to the first of those clips now.
I had really thought that I was incapable of this kind of behavior. I was surprised, I was dismayed to find out that I could really be a...
Because it was a prison to me. It still is a prison to me. I don't look on it as an experiment or a simulation. It was just a prison that was run by psychologists instead of run by the state. I began to feel that identity, that the person that I was that had decided to go to prison was distant from me, was remote, until finally I wasn't that. I was 416. I was really my number.
And you're certainly not the same person as if you were in street clothes and in a different role. You really become that person once you put on that khaki uniform, you put on the glasses, you take the nightstick, and you act the part.
So there you have it from the documentary Quiet Rage, made with Philip Zimbardo and other participants of the experiment, and how just participating in those roles worked a long way to strip their actual identity, got them to participate in the authority that's taking place. Now let's go to the next clip.
At dinner, prisoner 416 refused to eat his sausages left over from lunch.
416. It means something to me now. The number is a source of pride, like a name. It's important to me that I'm 416.
Get in that closet then.
He was thrown into the hole and ordered to hold the sausages in his hands. The guards threatened to cancel Thursday's visiting hour for all prisoners if 416 did not eat his sausages. 416 refused again. The guards then channeled the frustration of the other prisoners by having them express their anger directly at 416, who was in the hole.
Thank you, 416.
Not one of the prisoners protested the harshness and cruelty of the count. Before lights out, 416 was again put in the hole because he refused to eat his sausages, now filthy from being thrown all over the floor. John Wayne made a final attempt to get 416 to submit by setting the other prisoners against him.
Now, if 416 does not want to eat his sausages, then you can give me the blankets and sleep on the bare mattress, or you can keep your blankets and 416 will stay in another day. Now, what will it be?
I'll keep my blankets.
What will it be over here?
Keep my blankets.
How about 5486?
I'll give you my blankets, Mr. Correctional Officer.
We got 3 in favor of keeping the blankets.
We got 3, guess one. Keep your blankets. 416, you're going to be in there for a while. So just get used to it.
And that is some of the footage from that actual experiment. It was the part of the experiment that got them to stop it, to stop that experiment, but it shows that not only do people fall into their roles of authority or conversely of being a prisoner, but the psychology of dominating those prisoners, of dividing them amongst themselves, getting them to participate in their own punishment by going against the one who is in isolation and keeping their little privileges rather than rebelling against the authority figures in any way, even though they're in prison, even though they knew it was only an experiment, not a real prison that they would be getting out. So let's go now to Philip Zimbardo talking about why he ended that experiment.
I was watching all this on the television monitor in my office with one of my graduate students. I told her that I was really impressed with what we had accomplished. In less than a week, she looked at me and said, "I think what you are doing to those boys is horrible." And she was right. I had to end the experiment because that's what it was, an experiment, not a prison. These were real boys who were really suffering, and that fact had escaped me. I and everyone else around me, except for that graduate student, had gotten so far into their prison roles, prisoner, guard, superintendent, whatever, that it was hard to separate reality from the simulation. It just didn't occur to me until she spoke out that I, as a psychologist, as a human being, had to do something about that suffering. I had to end the experiment.
So it's very interesting that even the man who ran the experiment, set it up at the psychology department there in Stanford, himself found himself getting into the role and getting a little bit too into it. Now the next clip is even more interesting. It shows the prisoner known as 416, the one who was in isolation, speaking with the prison guard who became known inside the experiment as John Wayne, the one who became very authoritarian, talking about how they still felt very personally at odds from the experiment 2 months later. Let's go to that now.
In the present tense, it harms me.
How did it harm you? How does it harm you? Just to think about it, you mean that people can be like that?
Yeah. It let me in on some knowledge that I've never experienced firsthand. I've read about it. I've read a lot about it. But I've never experienced it firsthand. I've never seen someone turn that way. And I know you're a nice guy, because I know what you can turn into. I know what you're willing to do. If you say, "Oh, well, I'm not going to hurt anybody. Oh, well, it's a limited situation. It's over in 2 weeks."
Well, you in position, what would you have done?
I don't know.
I was running little experiments of my own.
Tell me about your little experiments.
Okay.
I'm curious.
I wanted to see just what kind of verbal abuse that people can take before they start objecting, before they start flashing back.
Yeah.
Under the circumstances, and it surprised me that no one said anything to stop me. No one said, "Kermit, you can't say those things to me. Those things are sick." Nobody said that. They just accepted what I said. I said, you know, go tell that man to the face he's the scum of the earth, and they'd do it without question. They'd do push-ups without question. They'd sit in the hole. They'd abuse each other. And here they're supposed to have a little bit, they're supposed to be together as a unit in jail, but here they're abusing each other because I requested them to, and no one questioned my authority at all.
So what's going on here is not only the issue of whether or not people obey authority when in a certain situation or context, but it really relates to the larger problem of an overall rise in state power and what they consider, if you study logical fallacy, to be a logical fallacy, which is appeal to authority. We've gone from 1776, when people like Thomas Jefferson tried to make the state seal motto, "Resistance to tyrants is obedience to God," or the alternate version, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God," to the period where people like Hitler quoted Romans 13 out of context to say that obeying authority is obeying God. Now, I want to bring up this right here, The Technological Society by Jacques Ellul. He's a French commentator, very similar to Sir Bertrand Russell, and he writes about this overall rise in power of technological technique, which falls to the state almost by default. The state has come to be dominant in many ways. He has a list here on page 253 inside the chapter on technique in the state. Industrial and commercial techniques of all orders, the state becomes increasingly the state boss to an ever greater degree. Insurance and banking techniques, including Social Security, family allotments, and nationalized banks. Organizational techniques, including the coordinating commissions among all services and inspection systems. Psychological techniques, including services of propaganda, vocational guidance, psychotechniques, artistic techniques, including radio, TV, and play, propaganda, scientific techniques, that speaks for itself, planning techniques, state planning, what's going to happen, biological techniques, all manner of eugenics, human stud forms, euthanasia, sociological techniques for the management of masses and the study of public opinion. So the rise of technology has coordinated with the rise in state power, and among the things you see in these kind of naked experiments of obeying authority, stuff that parallels what happened in the Holocaust, is a larger tendency to obey the state as a general authority for the masses to believe that they do have your best interest at heart. Somehow, I hope we can sound a warning by opening back up the chapter 1776 and keeping people from continuing to simply obey.